always been seen as a beacon of opportunity. People come from all over the world in search of the freedom to improve their lives. Whether it be the freedom to earn an honest living, or live without religious persecution, or live without political persecution, this is the land that they choose. But America's opportunity isn't available to everyone. Some people are exempted from experiencing the freedom and opportunity of America simply because of their racial, ethnic, or religious backgrounds. Even if they come from a different country, they aren't really accepted in America because they are different. Despite this, America is still seen as a land of opportunity. This is a form of discrimination, and yes, it is discrimination. If people aren't allowed to experience America's freedoms equally, then yes, it is discrimination. And this discrimination against minority groups has been a part of America since the very beginning. And we can still see it happening today. Let me give you an example. Back in 1924, nearly 100 years ago, the government passed a law on immigration that restricted people from entering the country if they came from a certain country before. Even if they were refugees fleeing war, they still weren't allowed into America to experience America's freedoms and opportunities and to better their lives simply because of their countries of origin. Now, a little while later, the government decided to loosen up a bit. They would maybe allow some people into the country if these people already had family members living in the US. Now again, this happened way back in 1924, but doesn't it sound really similar to a certain executive order passed just last year? History repeats itself, I guess. There have been so many laws that discriminate against so many different minorities in the US, and this has happened all throughout US history. These minorities include Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, African Americans, and so many more. And recently, with the government passing the travel ban, as it is called, Muslim Americans have also been discriminated against in America. There is a cycle of discrimination in America that affects the lives of so many minority people. And it is our job as 21st century citizens to recognize and to break this cycle. The discrimination doesn't have any benefit on any sort of people. The law that I mentioned from 1924, it has so many bad impacts on US economy, foreign relations, and so many other things. So if discrimination doesn't really have any benefits, why is it still around? Why are people still being discriminated against in America and all over the world? Now you might be thinking, oh, she's asking a big rhetorical question that we're gonna have to go home with and ponder, but no, I dedicated the second half of my talk to talking about this. One of the reasons that I think discrimination is still around in America is because of unfamiliarity. Not everyone knows everything about every group of people, and that's okay. But when we don't know a lot about certain groups of people, we more easily and readily accept stereotypes about them. We just don't know those stereotypes are right or wrong. So let me ask all of you, what are some stereotypes that you have surrounding Muslim Americans? When you think of the term Muslim, what comes to mind? Some of you might think of kebabs or hijabs. See what I did there? Some of you might think of words such as friend. Some of you might think of words such as terrorist. Now, in case you hadn't noticed, I am Muslim American. Surprise. I have spent 16 years completely immersed in being Muslim American. I grew up right here in Lowell, Massachusetts, where I went both to the local school and to the local mosque. So I think it's safe to say that I have a hefty amount of field research on Muslims and Muslim Americans. And from my expert opinion, what do I associate with the term Muslim? When I think of the term Muslim, I think of people greeting each other by saying, "Peace be with you." I think of people advocating peace and tolerance. I think of vibrant cultures, and honestly, I think of really good food. The Muslims in real life are very different from the Muslims you see on the news. They're very different from some stereotypes that you might have built surrounding them. But despite this, Muslim Americans and Muslims are still discriminated against in America. And not only Muslims, but so many other minorities are discriminated against. So what can we do about this? Again, another big rhetorical question, but again, I still have more answers. America is a big multicultural ground where people from all walks of life get to see each other and meet each other and break their stereotypes surrounding each other. So I urge you, if you feel uncomfortable around Muslim Americans or any group of people, just have a respectful conversation with them. Open yourself up to learning about them and to learning about their cultures and their practices. You might learn new things, and you might break your stereotypes surrounding these people. By breaking our own stereotypes and by learning about people, we can then teach others, and we can break other stereotypes surrounding Muslim Americans and other minorities. And by doing this, we can make America a more diverse and accepting place. There's a verse from the Quran, Islam's holy book, that I think really encapsulates this idea of acceptance. It's where God says, "We have created you into nations and tribes so that you may know each other." Discrimination has never had any positive impacts on any group of people. What we really learn from and what really impacts us and benefits us as Americans and as citizens of the world is by accepting each other and learning about each other and being open to one another. So I urge you, learn about others and consider the stereotypes that you've built surrounding others, including Muslim Americans. And by doing that, by first accepting our own stereotypes and then changing our own misconceptions, and then by changing others' misconceptions and stereotypes, we can break this cycle of discrimination in America. And by doing that, we can become citizens of a 21st century of diversity. Thank you.